good to be here this morning. Thankful for a beautiful day, the help to be able to come. Already been a blessing to be here. Got a wonderful lesson this morning. You say that's kind of strange to talk about crucifixion this morning. But it's the only way we can be saved. It was one of the pieces of the plan of God to save sinners like me and you. And, like Brother Jim said in his prayer, it's personal. Each and every individual. It's not just a collective group. It's whosoever will. Every individual that's ever been born, ever will be born. That's who he died for. And he did it freely. And I could never, and any other human being could never even start to describe what it was like. We can do our research and study it out and all that and learn a little more about it, but you could never really comprehend what took place there on the cross to die for our sins. Anybody got anything you'd say this morning? I'd ask you to pray for Sheila this morning. We had a bout with poison oak this week. She got poison oak in her eye, so I've got it on the side of my face. That's why I look like a grizzly this morning, but it's pretty mean stuff, so just pray for us if you would. Got a neighbor that's really sick in the hospital with COVID. I ask you to pray for him as well. There's a lot to pray for. Most of all, those are lost. Those that hadn't really got a hold of what we're studying about this morning, that he died for them. He's still willing to save. That payment he made there on the cross is still there today. As Brother Jason said, talking about the insurance companies, everything you deal with in the world, you owe a little more, you need to pay a little more. This one's already paid in full. Nothing left to do. Nothing I can do to add to it. Nothing I can bring to offer him for it. Just come as a sinner. Believing on him, believing what he did. We start here in chapter 27 again, verse 26. It says, Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And again, we talked a little bit about Barabbas last week. You put yourself in his place. He was found guilty as charged. He had done the crime. He deserved to die. Christ, on the other hand, had not done anything wrong, had not sinned, had not committed any crime, yet he was delivered up to be crucified. And again, this is all God's plan. He's doing this willingly. They're not taking him. They're not crucifying him. He's laying his life down freely. It says, Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the common hall and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers. And they stripped him and put on him a scarlet robe. When they had platted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews. And as I study this, and they don't realize who this is that they're doing this to. He's dying in their place. I think we mentioned that last week. He's paying the price for their sins, the one that's beating on him and doing all these things to him. He didn't deserve any of it. He wasn't guilty of anything. Yet he took it willingly. He didn't have to. He volunteered. It's pretty hard to find anybody to volunteer for anything now. It's pretty hard to find anybody to do anything you pay them to do it. It's a pitiful time we live in. You can't get anybody to work. Can't get anybody to help you. What if he'd have been that way? What if, I was thinking about it, I was sitting there this morning, what if it was me that was put in this place? What if it was me who was dependent on to carry out such a great thing? Would I be willing? We talked about last week when he was going in the garden, he went a little further. This is just another step. He's going a little bit further to pay our sin debt. And how awful it is to think about them doing these things to him, the Savior of the world, the one that can save them. It says, and they spit on him and took the reed and smote him on the head. And if you go and study about crucifixion and how they did it, it was an awful, awful thing, awful way to die. And I can't help but believe they went a little further with him just because they hated him so much. But and that, that's another thought. They hated him, yet he loved them enough to die for them. Yeah. Brother Jason talked about this morning, being willing to die for your own child. Not feel like anybody with any gumption at all would do that. But these are people who hated him. They're not his children. They're not people that love on him and appreciate him. They hate him. He'd give his life anyway. He says, and after that they had mocked him. They took the robe off from him and put his own raiment on him and led him away to crucify him. And so he came out. They found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they were come to the place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of the skull, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall, and when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And again, you think about him being who he is. And he could have called the angels down at any moment and stopped this. He could have spoke a word and obliterated all of them in a moment. Yet his love was so great and his mind was so fixed on what he had to do. He did it anyway. And again, for you, for me, that makes it a whole lot different. And when you think about it, he did it for the whole world, well, that's great, that's wonderful. When you stop and dial it in on you, he did it for you and for me. That's a whole different thing. And that's what it's about. It's a personal relationship between you and him. You and me as individuals have to accept it and believe it. I can't do it for you. You can't do it for me. As much as people we are concerned about and love to be saved, we can't do it for them. They have to see this and realize it and accept it as truth. But it says, and they crucified him, and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And sitting down, they watched him there. And how awful this is to even think about. This terrible things they're doing to him, and they're sitting there watching, just soaking it all in. And they're looking at the one dying for their sins. It says, and set up over his head the accusation written, this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. And their accusation was true because that's who he is. That's who he was. It says, then there were two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and the other on the left. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads and saying, thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. And this tell you they've been listening to what he's been saying. They quoted something that he said here. They've been around him. They've seen what he did. So now they're poking fun of him, making fun of him, saying, if you can do all these things, save yourself. And he could have, but I'm glad he didn't. If he had saved himself and hadn't followed through, we'd still be lost. We wouldn't have a way to go to heaven. We'd have to spend eternity in hell. I'm glad he didn't quit. And it should encourage us not to quit. It's worth it. Keep on going. He says, and say that thou destroyest the temple, buildest in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and the elders said, he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. And of course, we know that's not the truth. If they were going to believe him, they could believe him before. That was just, and I thought about it as I was sitting there this morning before I got up, but Yeah, that's just the way we do it. That's the way we want to do it on our terms. Well, if you'll come down, we'll believe you. You come down now, we believe what you've been saying is true, instead of just trusting in you right off the bat. We want it on our terms, not on his. And that's just our flesh. We all like that. We all have that in us. But I'm glad he does things on his terms, on his time frame. This is just another piece. He had to be born of a virgin. He had to die on the cross. It stopped at either place. It still wouldn't have been complete. Next week we'll study about him rising again. It took them all three. And he was carrying out what he was sent here to do. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. Again, just mocking his person, mocking what he had said and done. Said the thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour. If I understand this correctly, this is midday, starting at 12 o'clock till 3 o'clock. Darkness over all the land. Everything went dark. What a sobering time it must have been. Can you imagine? I mean, right about now, everything going dark on a beautiful day like this. Staying dark for 3 hours. I'm sure the scientists would explain it away and tell us something that happened, and that's this and this, but this is God turning his back, because you can't look on sin. I can't fathom what it must have felt like. Can't even comprehend what it must have been like. It says about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And I believe these 3 hours of time he was taking the punishment for you and me. The load of the sins of the whole world was on him. The Father that he had been with forever in eternity now was nowhere to be. He had, what you would say, turned his back on him. He couldn't look on him anymore. He couldn't look on the sin that he was bearing. What an awful time. What a sad time. Some of them that stood there when they heard that said, this man called for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. The rest said, let be, let's see whether Elias will come and save him. And again, just awful to think about. Anybody in this kind of anguish and pain and doing all this suffering, they're just sitting back looking, see what's going to happen. Let's see if Elias comes and gets him. Let's just see what happens. And you read in some of the other accounts about what all they did to him, and beating him with the cat o' nine tails and all the awful things they did, and how he must have looked at this point, and how sad it is for them to be looking in the face of the own Savior and doing all these things. And let's just see what happens. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. He gave it up himself. He laid his life down. They didn't take it. They didn't kill him. He said when it's enough. And he laid his life down for you and me. And Lord help us so we could really get a hold of that. That's what should drive us to be all we can be for him, to tell other people about it. Hey, listen, somebody cares about you. Somebody cared enough to die in your place. We were guilty. We sung the song this morning, I was guilty. Guilty as charged. We couldn't come up with any kind of excuse or any kind of thing like that to prove that we were not guilty. Guilty. We're sinners. Because of what Adam and Eve did in the garden, we're sinners. We're guilty. Can't say anything else about it. We're guilty. We deserve to die there, not him. Yet he said, I'll go. He said, I'll pay their sin debt. I'll go to the cross in their place. And it should sober us to study about it, and we should study it. We should go back and study it often and just realize that, hey, somebody cares about me. Somebody cared enough about me to die in my place. I feel like if one of you died in my place, one of you stepped out in front of a car for me or knocked me out of the way and died in my place, I think I'd be pretty thankful. I think I'd be pretty grateful. I'm sure that'd probably wear off after time, just like it does with this. We've heard it all of our life. I've heard it since I could know what I was hearing. So sometimes it becomes just words. But we should really study about it. Really think about how much He loved you, that He would do this for you, that you could be saved. And not only me, but everybody else, anybody that will. He says, Jesus, when He cried, again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. Verse 51 says, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. Behold, I believe that was immediately, as soon as He gave up the ghost. The veil was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. If you study about the veil, it was, I didn't go back and look it up, but it's really tall. And it's some really, really thick material that nobody could have torn. It was pretty amazing. Go back and look it up and study about it, but I didn't get all the details. But as soon as He gave up the ghost, as soon as He died there, that veil was rent in twain. And we all know what the veil was. The high priest had to go back in there and do the sacrifices to cover their sins for another year. That's no more. He just took care of it. He made the payment, applied the blood. They don't have to do that anymore. And what a blessing that is to think about. I've talked about it before when we were studying the Old Testament, how nerve-wracking that must have been every time they had to go do those sacrifices. And the people depending on the high priest to do it the right way. I'd hate to be dependent on somebody else to do it, wouldn't you? Be worried if they're doing it right or not and all that. He did it right. He took care of it once and for all. The payment was made. There had no more sacrifices had to be made. He was making the ultimate sacrifice. It says that the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after His resurrection, and went into the holy city and appeared to many. I was thinking about what Brother Jason taught there Wednesday night. He'd been telling them about this going to take place while he was here. And now we see it happening. Those graves were open, people getting up when He rose. And just like He said, it should encourage us. He told us He's coming back. He told us those that are dead in Christ are going to meet us in the air. It's going to happen. It's going to take place, just like He said. He said, and it came out of the graves, and after His resurrection went into the holy city and appeared to many. Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake, and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, truly this was the Son of God. Finally they said the truth. Truly they figured it out now. All these things happening now, they see that He truly is the Son of God. And heaven help us to do the same. We have all the proof we need right here in His Word. He's told us all about it. We just need to believe it. You know, they didn't believe it up to this point. Thank the Lord for the day when you get a hold of it, when the Holy Spirit shows you and shows you what He did for you. It shows you that there's a way to escape hell and go to heaven. And He says, and many women were there, beholding the far off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, ministered to Him, among which was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. When the evening was come, there was a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. He went to Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body be delivered. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. He rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. There was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Now the next day that followed, the day of the preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I'll rise again. And, you know, again, it's amazing to think about all that these people remember that he said. Hey, I remember this fellow said he was going to rise in 3 days. So they had heard enough and knew enough to be saved. They had heard enough to believe him, but they chose not to. And how awful that is. We talked about Judas last week, studied about him, how awful that is. That he was so close. That he was with him all the time, and then so close to him, but then he deceived him. It's just sad. And it's still the same today. It's still available today. You look around the world today and it's an awful mess. Lots and lots of sin and people going, it's just unimaginable what was going on. But still yet, his word is available to them. It's being taught and preached today still. I'd say maybe more than ever on the internet, radio. I mean, you can get it about anywhere. And what a blessing that is. That there's something good on there. But it's available. And he's still asking people to come to him. That, like I say, that price has been paid. The sin debt's already been paid, and it's available to anybody that will. But it says, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say to the people, he's risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first. So they're saying here, let's seal him up in there. We'll watch guard over him. Make sure he don't get out of here. They'll come steal him away. So they'd been listening to what he said. They'd heard what he'd been preaching and teaching. And they were trying to do their part to keep that thing from happening. And couldn't be done. He came to do this, and it was going to be fulfilled. So Pilate said to them, you have a watch. Go your way, make it as sure as you can. They done everything they could do to keep him in that grave. They done everything they know to do to keep him there, so he couldn't claim that he got up. Guess what? Didn't matter. He got up anyway. They don't realize who they're dealing with here. It says, make it as sure as you can. Do everything you can do. I believe Pilate believed he was going to get up anyway. He'd already figured out he wasn't guilty. He knew that it was a sham and there wasn't nothing to it. He didn't come out and say it. When he said, just the way that sounds to me, you make it as sure as you can. You do all you can do, but he's going to get up anyway. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting watch. So they're doing all they know to do, try to keep this from happening. But they can't. It's in God's plan. It's the way he had it made out that we could be saved. And, you know, we need to go back and study this often and just realize the punishment he took for you and me, for our sins. He didn't have to. He done it willingly. We read there, he yielded up and ghost himself. They didn't take his life. He laid it down. And just to imagine that anybody could love you that much is just beyond imagination. I wish I could to tell you exactly how it was this morning. Tell you could really get a hold of it, but I can't. I don't have words or understanding. None of us do. But we all are digging a little deeper into it. Realize that, you know, there's lots of people in the world that are just begging for attention, begging for love. You think about and see little children that are being abused and all these awful things, and they just want somebody to love them. And can I tell you this morning, He loves you. He loves you enough to die in your place. He loves you enough to take care of your problems and your needs. And whatever you might face today, He loves you. And He's there to help you. He paid the ultimate price that we can be saved. That's enough to shout the rest of the way home for. We get used to it and accustomed to it and don't really think about it like we ought to, but you stop thinking about it. Somebody died in your place. You're guilty. I was guilty. I deserve to die. Yet He died in my place. He said, I'll do it. I'll go. What love, what mercy, what grace just cannot be explained. There's just not words to describe it. It'd be good if we would try to learn more about it, try to figure it out, but you never will. In this fleshly body, you'll never figure it out. You'll never understand it. But it's I don't know. It's just kind of got me this morning. Don't even know what to say. He knew what I was, knew what I was going to be after He saved me. Yet He loved me enough to die anyway. I mean, none of us deserved it. None of us can do anything ever to deserve it. You can't work enough. You can't do enough. You can't be good enough. You can't. It's impossible. But when you get to the place where you see what He did and you see what you are and I am, that's the place you get from Him. These fellows that figured it out, it's truly He's the Son of God. Things had to happen in their life to open their eyes. They'd heard all about it and been all through this whole situation. But now, all of a sudden, the earthquake and the things that were done clicked in their minds. Oh, okay, He is the one. He's telling the truth. And it's still the same today. You can tell people about it till you're blue in the face. And we need to. We should. But until you see it personally, in your own self, in your own heart, it don't mean anything. Like we said before, when the death angel come through Egypt there, when they had to put the blood on the doorpost. That's what it's all about, it's being applied, the blood being applied. They had it, they had the blood, and they could have had the blood in the bowl and ready to go outside. And not took it and put it on the doorpost. Wouldn't have done them any good. They had everything they needed to be safe. It was all there, available. But they didn't apply it. Still the same today. Anybody that's lost, it's available. The blood's already been applied, so they just got to accept it. And it's that simple. We make it out to be complicated. We make it out to you've got to be wealthy, or you've got to do so much work, or you've got to be in such a certain church, you've got to do all these things, but you can't do anything. We're guilty before Him. We're sinners, all of us. You just got to accept what He did. Like these fellows here. Hey, truly, He was the Son of God. He's the one. He's the one we've been hearing about. He's the one that died in your place. You just got to believe Him. And that's not rocket science. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have any money in the bank. You just got to come broken before Him. Say, Lord, save me. I believe it. I believe what You said is true. I want it. He'll give it. He still will today. Anybody got anything you want to say this morning? Pretty sorry excuse for teaching, I know. I hope it's jogged your memory a little bit, makes you go back and study it again. But pray for Brother Jamie next week. He's going to be teaching for us this Sunday. So let's remember Brother Daniel as he comes to preach.